Hey everybody, Dr. Diane, your libido doc here, talking about how to have the hard conversation about sex with your partner. So the first thing is when we get this down, when we establish some boundaries, some rules, some hows of this, it doesn't actually have to be a hard conversation. This can actually turn into a foreplay conversation. But of course, we have to take a step back and realize that egos do get involved with this, and sex is something there's so much ego around because innately, most of us want to feel like we are providing so much for our partner, that we are showing up, we're providing all this pleasure, that they love being with us, they see us as, sexy, that we feel sexy. So, there can be a lot of ego and sensitivity wrapped up around this particular topic. And of course, we want to protect our partner's egos and how they feel, because there can be subsequent performance anxiety if this goes wrong. And then it feels like, okay, partner is feeling like they might be doing something wrong and they get worried about doing it wrong. And then it's performance anxiety and it gets worse. There's some general kind of principles to follow. And then there's also a sense of just needing to rip the Band-Aid off, right? So essentially, some of the general principles to follow are things such as the where, the when, and the how. So making sure that people are not in a super stressful mood is definitely important. Now, I want to be careful because sometimes it can be one of these things around like waiting for the exact perfect moment, and the exact perfect, it might not ever feel like the exact perfect moment, right? So sometimes we do just have to go for it, but you also want to make sure that it's like not this day where a partner got yelled at all day by a staff member or a boss, or the kids did something particularly horrible at school and are now on probation, or, something that's really stressful like that. So it can be a good, thing to, tell a partner like, hey, I really want to have a beautiful conversation about how we can connect more. It's a conversation I really want to keep super happy and light, and it's about all of us coming together. And when could we have this conversation? I'd really like to have this soon. Sometimes if we ask permission and we let them know it's coming, and we frame it as not the honey, I gotta talk kind of thing, right? We frame it as, hey, this can actually be a way of connecting deeper, but it gives them that heads up that this conversation's coming, and it allows them to go into that conversation oftentimes with a choice. Now, if you try that, lots of times, and you try that, say, half a dozen times, and it's like, well, it's not a good time now, not a good time now. In that scenario, you might have to get to a point where it's like, we just have to have this conversation, right? So it's never going to be 100% perfect time, but you do want to consider some of the when. The where is really important, especially in the beginning. So we want to be careful around, hey, if this conversation doesn't go well, you don't want to have that conversation in the bedroom immediately after intimacy, right? Because it doesn't go well. You don't want them anytime then you go to the bedroom, which for most people is the predominant place where intimacy happens. And, this is if you have a different place where you're intimate a lot, then that would probably be not the place to, to have this conversation. Now, once there's a lot of safety around this conversation, right? Once you've done this effectively and well, and you've seen this conversation actually brings you, closer together, and sometimes this conversation can turn into almost like a foreplay kind of conversation, then at that point, sometimes it is very appropriate to do this conversation in the bedroom or in other areas where you're intimate. But if this is a newer thing to learn these skills of how to have these conversations, typically it's good to not have this conversation immediately after intimacy or in the bedroom or in any place that you're commonly intimate, because if you do, it can just remind, anytime you're in that spot, it can bring up the memory of a conversation if it didn't go well, and that could lead to performance anxiety. And then the how is, I really like focusing on what is good and how to make it better. Not to say that we can't also mention those things that we don't like, but initially when we're establishing trust, it can look like this. Honey, I love when you put your hand on my thigh and tickle me in this way, right? And sometimes I'm like, you're there, and I'm like, oh, don't move on from that spot because it feels so good and I'm so turned on. So can you stay at that spot more, right? So we're taking what we love and we're building on it, right? And we're saying like, oh, this technique you're doing, I love it so much. And you know what I think would make it even better? Or you know what I want to build on from there, right? So we can see that we're taking something, we're being very specific, and we're saying like, hey, here's an idea I have because this is so amazing. You're bringing me so much pleasure. Here's an idea I have of what we can try to make it so much better. And when we start with those kind of things, oftentimes then we can build enough trust that we can then get to a point and say like, you know, this other thing that you do, like, I know it's supposed to bring me pleasure. And I know that you're coming at this other thing to bring me pleasure. And I'm just not liking that thing. It doesn't have that same impact as XYZ over here. So I'm wondering if we can actually do more of this over here and maybe a little less of that because my pleasure body is just responding so well to this other thing. So we're still allowing in this to like talk about that thing that maybe we're not responding to, maybe is actually a turn off, but we're doing it almost by this like reorientation of how we can make this other thing that they're doing that's giving us pleasure, that's providing so much, they're such a good lover for doing. We're building on that to make that thing even better. So more of the focus is turned on how we can make this better versus this other thing. And of course, we do want to express this other thing, but if we can do it in this way, oftentimes that can go well. Of course, if this gets stressful in any ways, it's a good time to take a step back and just be like, hey, this conversation's gone awry. Like the point of this conversation is how can I be closer to you? And that's really what I want out of this conversation. So, you know, we can ask our partner too around like the point of this is like, I want to be a better lover for you. I want us to have like even more amazing sex. Like it's already amazing. And I want to take it to the next level with you. And sometimes partners will say, like, sometimes you might find a partner like that will say something like, well, it's fine. It's fine the way it is. I've seen this in couples I've worked with, or they're just like, you know, one partner's like, well, we don't need to. I already love it. And, you know, and a good response for that is like, oh, I love it too. And I'm so glad that you feel ultimately satisfied. And I feel so satisfied too. But I also do have an interest in higher and higher and higher levels. And you already provide so much pleasure. And I just know that I can even reach higher levels of pleasure and I can have higher levels of closeness to you. And I'm really personally interested in taking it to the next level. And even if you feel so satisfied, I'm wondering if you'd be open to like hearing about other ways you can provide this other even higher level of pleasure or experiment with me. It would mean so much to me, right? So we can come back to this like, yes, like it's beautiful. And even if they're okay with it and they feel that way, would they be okay with like coming back and seeing if they could provide even more pleasure for you? So these are some thoughts. These are some ideas, some techniques that I've seen work well. Like I said, sometimes you just have to get in there and rip the Band-Aid off. That's sometimes true, but let me know how this goes, right? Please do write in the comments what's working, what's not working. If you have other strategies that you have tried with your lover that has helped and that has worked, it's always good to hear from others about effective strategies that you use. So please, I want this to be a community for us to share things that work, things that don't. This is how we learn and grow, is from each other. So please do comment and let us know what has worked well for you. And so we can all share ideas and get different techniques from each other as well. All right, everybody. Thanks so much. See you in the next one.